Welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors, everyone. This is Rachelle Vanderzanden here with Corey Janoff.
I'm here too.
Whoop, whoop. Today, we are going to talk about early retirement and how doable is it or not doable. Obviously, there's lots of folks out there talking about things like FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And I feel like when we chat with clients, most people fall on like one end of the spectrum or the other. Either it's like, I love medicine, I'm going to work forever, I can't imagine quitting. Or it's like, this job is really demanding. I'm already burned out and I've barely started. Like, when can I retire? Let's get out of here ASAP. And of course, there's some people that fall in the middle. Not everyone is going to be on one of those two extreme ends, but a lot of times people are. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how doable is it? What is early retirement? Is it when you're 60? Is it when you're 55? Obviously, it depends on who you are. But there's lots of different ways to look at this and some challenges and some things that you all have working for you that are advantages. And so we'll talk about how to get there potentially and how to have some reasonable expectations.
I would say most people are kind of in the normal, like to retire in my early 60s or have the option to at least. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely, there's a reason it's called work and the job, not fun. Like, I think if you pulled most, not just doctors, but most Americans, if the choice was either work or not work, they'd choose the latter. But there's definitely some weirdos like us, Rochelle and I, who might want to keep going forever if we like our jobs. Um,
Yeah, especially if it's not like 40 hours a week. And I think that that's very feasible for doctors a lot of times too to potentially go part-time. I also think that there's such a wide variety of how demanding a job is, like for doctors even. So if you're working 4 days a week and it's all like lots of it's administrative and not necessarily a lot of like patient facing time. It may be a little bit less demanding than if, you're someone who's completing a lot of procedures like over and over and over again. Like obviously there's going to be a lot of variability in how demanding your job is. And maybe you can make a change to that aspect of it before retirement age just to make things a little bit easier.
and I
But
think
lots of different things to consider.
the level of autonomy you have and control
Hmm.
over your day to day and week to week, month to month is huge. Like,
Yeah.
again, for Rochelle and I, we're not out here digging ditches. It's not physically demanding labor where like a surgeon or a dentist, like that's a physical job. You're standing, you're bent over, there's a reason a lot of people who do procedural medicine and are operating have back and neck problems because you're standing and hunched over and it's physically demanding. But if you're in a not as physically demanding role, you potentially could do it for a lot longer. So there is some element of the physical nature of the job, but
Hmm.
also like Rochelle and I get to make our own schedule. We can choose to have 40 client meetings a week, or we can choose to have 10 client meetings a week. Like we can choose which days we want to have meetings on. If we see the schedule filling up and we've got a lot of appointments during a day, we can just block off some time in between and be like, hey, I already got 5 appointments today. That's it. I'm capping it. No more meetings scheduled today. So like not all of you have that luxury. And I think being able to decide how much you want to take on, how little you want to take on, when you want to work, when you want to take vacation, being in that position of control I think definitely will lead to more job satisfaction and potential desire to want to continue. Whereas
Hmm.
if you're showing up, you've got to see 20, 30 patients a day, 5 days a week, and you got to put in a request for your vacation 3 months in advance. It may or may not get approved. You only get this many weeks of vacation a year. Like you're told where to be, what to do, like that's not as enjoyable. Like
Hmm.
the ability to say no with zero repercussion. And I guess, there is some repercussion. If you say, no, I'm only going to see 10 patients a day instead of 20, well, your income will be less, but that's a choice that you could make. Just like
Hmm.
it's a choice if we want to serve 50 clients versus 100 clients versus 200 clients. Um, not quite the same parallels, but anyways, like being in that control position is, um, I think, huge from a job satisfaction standpoint. So there's something there. Like if you can kind of migrate into a position of autonomy and control over your day to day, that'll probably make your job a lot more enjoyable. And if
Hmm.
that means some income sacrifice, well, in the back end of your career, that might be a fair trade-off. It's like, hey, if in my 50s I can go from working for the man to working for myself, even if I'm making less, but I could keep doing that on my own terms until 70 versus if I keep going at the rate I'm going, I'm going to burn out by 55. Okay. Well, it's a decision to make.
Hmm. Yep. I think when we talk about retiring early, like if we're not talking about this slow kind of downgrade and like working less and less over time, generally what we are talking about is that financial independence piece. So it's not even necessarily like I'm going to quit my job at age 55. It's like, okay, if I am choosing to work, it's because I want to, not because I have to. So the whole idea of financial independence is like now I have enough money that if I wanted to just be like, I'm done. I'm out. Like, I'm not working anymore, that you could choose to do that. And I think that even if things don't change for you in your work, like knowing that you could just walk out also gives you a lot of peace of mind. Like, I may continue to choose to work because I still enjoy my work or whatever it is, but I don't have to. And that makes me feel better about the fact that I am working.
Because
Like,
you can
that's,
say no. Like
yeah,
if the
you can say
hospital
no.
says, hey, we just
Yeah.
lost whatever, a doctor, we need you to cover every other Saturday. No, I'm not going to do that. It's like, well, we need
Yeah.
you to. It's like, well, too bad. I'm not showing up on Saturdays. So go find a locum doc to do that or find someone else because I'm not doing it. Like
Yeah.
if they fire you, who cares? Like
Yep. Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, you can set your limits much more easily. The other part of this whole financial independence is it's not like, okay, now I no longer have income and now I'm like kind of scrimping and scraping and I can get by. Ideally, it's okay, I have kind of decided this is the lifestyle that I want to leave and I'm financially independent to the extent that I could continue leading this lifestyle. Like, we don't want to retire and have to take fewer vacations. That's not the goal. Like you want to be able to live comfortably when you're retired. So ideally, like that financial independence is kind of sustaining a similar lifestyle, maybe even taking an extra vacation or two to what you had while you were working and earning income. And that looks different for everyone. Like obviously, like that lifestyle piece is going to be a big part of retirement planning. And I think like these average retirement numbers, like everyone has their own expectation of like what is reasonable retirement age. A lot of times we think about like age 65 as being kind of a standard-ish retirement age. You can't collect your full Social Security benefit until you're like 68 at this point. So there's like a couple different numbers that we look at. And then early retirement is really like even 60 is early retirement. Like 55 is really early retirement. 50 is like that is very early retirement. And the earlier you do it, the harder it is. And like there's quite a few challenges that you kind of have to overcome in order to really get to those substantially early retirement ages.
yeah, like if you just follow normal procedural rules around retirement accounts specifically, the
Hmm.
earliest you can retire and access the money in your 401k, IRAs, et cetera, is age 59 and a half under current rules. Now that could
Yep.
change if Congress updates the rules, which they could. Um, Now there are some exceptions to where you can get to your 401k, IRA money before then, but there's some stipulations around it. So if you just want no strings attached, spend freely, 60 is basically the
Yeah.
earliest you can retire and access your qualified retirement accounts. Now, if you have a healthy amount in a taxable brokerage account, if you've done a good job saving and investing over time and you were in a, high income bracket and you just, the 401ks and IRA aren't going to be enough to save sufficiently, you probably have a healthy amount in quote unquote non-retirement or taxable assets. Maybe you have $5 million that you can tap into without penalty prior to age 60. Well, that could bridge the gap from age 55 to 60 pretty easily. Um, so there definitely could be scenarios where you're in a position and can feasibly retire before 60, but If we're looking at just specifically the qualified retirement plans, 60 is the earliest for most of you that you'd be considering tapping into those.
Hmm. Yep. There's a few challenges that are kind of specific to medical professionals too with saving for retirement. So, one and probably the biggest is that you generally get a much later start to be able to like put substantial amounts of money towards your long-term savings. So, you have extra years that are in school where you're literally not earning income, or if you are earning income, it's likely a very, very small amount. And then beyond that, you have additional years in training for residency or fellowship or both. And that may mean that you don't start saving for retirement until you're in your 30s or whatever age it is that you kind of finish and start as an attending if you're a physician and you are making like that big kid money where you can now start setting money aside very proactively for retirement. So there's just all of these years that you're making up for. And the earlier you're able to invest, the more that money is able to grow because it just has more time to grow and compound. So if you're not starting until your 30s and you want to retire in your 50s, you just have a much more like a much shorter time period to make all of that happen than like the average person getting out of college and starting saving in their 20s who's going to work until, maybe their 50s or 60s. So it's just something to be aware of. Like obviously none of these challenges are necessarily challenges that can't be overcome, but they are like big challenges. And it's a reason why a lot of medical professionals just have to save substantially more because we're trying to make up for that lost time.
And we've talked about this in older episodes. Feel free to dig through the archives to see those. But I think the good general rule of thumb for most physicians, assuming you start working your big kid job in your early 30s and want to retire by your early to mid 60s, saving at least 20% of your income, your gross income. So for simple math, if you're making 100,000 a year, you'd want to save 20,000 a year. If you're making 500,000 a year, you'd want to save 100,000 a year. If you're making $1 million a year, you want to save 200,000 a year for retirement purposes. We've done the math enough times. If you can start putting 20% away in your early 30s, that should put you in a good position to be able to retire by your early 60s and live a similar lifestyle in retirement to the lifestyle you grow accustomed to living while working. Now, if you're starting later than your early 30s, or you want to retire earlier than your early 60s, you need to save more than 20%, most likely,
Yeah.
or get lucky with employer matches or investment returns. But if we want to only focus on what we can control, we can't control what our employer gives us, we can't control what the investments do, that 20% number or more is a good starting point for most of you to
Right.
focus on.
Right. And that may not get you to like quote unquote early retirement. Again, like Corey was saying, maybe it's from your early 30s or mid 30s to like your early 60s. But if you want to retire at 55, it's going to take substantially more because even that like 5 year difference of like retiring early, it has kind of an exponential effect on what your overall need is for retirement because your money doesn't have as long to grow. You don't have as many years of savings and you have more years of hopefully living in retirement or retiring at age 55. Like you're having more years of where you're going to be hopefully thriving and spending money and doing all the things.
Yeah, all else
Um,
being
I,
equal, retiring at
yeah,
55 versus 60 is like a 10-year swing from a
yeah.
saving standpoint because you have 5 years less of savings,
Hmm.
and assuming you live the same amount of time, 5 years more of spending that you have to draw from your retirement accounts. So that's, 5 years less plus 5 years more, that's a decade of
Hmm.
additional gap that we have to account for. So you've got to make up for that in your higher savings rate from
Yeah.
age whatever to 55 if you want to be quit cold turkey at 55.
Yeah, yeah. So that time is a big piece of it. The other part I think that is a challenge potentially for medical professionals is like that lifestyle creep. You have all of this delayed gratification. You're in school, You're in residency, you're in fellowship, you know that you have to live on a shoestring budget. We've got student loans to pay off, we have all of these challenges. And then when some of those things are behind you and you're now earning more money, hopefully we're on track to have our debt paid off. It feels like I should be able to buy this. I should be able to get into this house. Like based on my income, I deserve that. The bank is willing to lend me this amount for a house. Why would I not spend that much on a house? And that lifestyle creep, it makes it so that you're spending quite a bit more, which then makes it so that you're saving a lot less because of that spending. And also it means like now we need more spending money in retirement because the lifestyle that we've become accustomed to is harder to replicate. Like we don't want to again like retire and like, cut our budget back by 30 or 40% at that point.
I
So,
think, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think it's important to kind of like realize what your goals are and that there's trade-offs. If you want to retire at 55, it's important that you spend less right now and you're save more right now. But if you're willing to work a little bit longer so that you can have kind of the lifestyle you've been hoping for, then that's okay. Like that's a choice that you get to make.
And that lifestyle piece, the delayed gratification, like you as doctors are some of the most esteemed, respected, highly regarded professionals in the world. And
Yep.
with that, there comes like a certain, I don't know if stereotype is the right word, but like
Assumption.
assumption that you deserve a certain lifestyle because of that. You've done all this hard work. You've jumped through all the hoops. You're saving people's lives. Like what's a more noble profession than that? Like you deserve to live at the very least comfortable, if not by all general global standards, luxurious lifestyle. Like, you don't need to have 100 servants feeding you grapes, but like, living in comfort, being able to stay in the nice hotels and drive a nice car and go on the nice vacations, live in a nice house. Like, yes, you deserve that. But that also comes at a cost. And if you want to have that while you're working and continue to have that in retirement, like that's going to cost a lot of money. So you need to make a lot of money, which many of you do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also going to need, if you want to retire early, you're going to need to save a lot too to replicate that
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle in retirement, and even just maintain that lifestyle. So again, it's just a simple math equation. If you want to live on 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year, 500,000 a year, $1 million a year, like you just got to save a certain multiple of that to be able to sustain that lifestyle in retirement. Doesn't matter what the number is; it's just a simple ratio that we've got to get to so we can replicate it. And the
Mm-hmm.
larger that baseline number is, the larger the top line number is that you're going to need to have in order to maintain that standard of living for the rest
Yep.
of your life. So,
Yep. Yeah. I think like we were talking about before, you want to focus on the things that you control or can control. So if you are able to save early, even when you're in residency and fellowship, awesome. Like let's start saving as much as we can as early as we can, especially when you start as an attending to just start like those savings. Like if we've got some debt to pay off real quick, like credit cards and things like that, like do it. Clean it all up, make sure that you're in a good spot. But ideally you're getting like a really healthy savings rate established early on as an attending so that you get used to that. If we're saving 20, 25, 30% for our long-term goals and we've established that very quickly, you've also established that like this is the amount of spending money that I have, like what's left, like after I've already put my money towards the goals that I've decided I have for myself. And then you get used to living on that amount and like that's the lifestyle. That's it. So that's a big thing. I think one of the big things that you can focus on with your spending and your costs is housing. Like it's probably going to be your biggest fixed expense every month will be like your mortgage insurance, property taxes and things like that, depending on the person. But for most people, like that's it. So if you can get into a house that fits within your budget comfortably and reasonably and allows you to do the other things that you want to do, like save for retirement or college or, put a little extra money towards a vacation, then that's going to be really helpful to both avoid lifestyle creep, but also give yourself like a comfortable space to get your savings where you want it to be.
and this episode, like the title is early retirement, like some of the challenges of retiring early. So this is assuming we want to retire early, the less you spend on the big ticket items like housing, the more likely you'll be able to get there. That's not saying,
Hmm.
hey, you have to spend less on housing. Like you could buy the quote unquote doctor house, the house that you can afford, but it might mean you're not retiring early, and that's okay. Like it's all about
Hmm.
trade-offs. Like, and that's a personal decision. Not, you don't have to, you know, spend less on housing just because Corey and Rochelle said so. It's just if you want to get to that point of financial independence sooner, then
Hmm.
reducing those big ticket items. Cutting out the latte at Starbucks isn't going to move the needle, but
Mm-mm.
spending $5,000 on your mortgage instead of $9,000 on your mortgage, that's a big difference. And we're talking in kind of like today's prices for what houses a lot of doctors in big metro areas would be looking at. Like if you just buy a median priced house in some parts of America, maybe your mortgage is $2,000. Or rent. If you can rent in a big city for 3,500 bucks, but owning a home is going to cost you 12,000 a month.
San Francisco, here we come.
Like, I mean, yeah, there are benefits to owning a home, but that's a big difference there to where maybe renting does make sense if you're going to be in
Hmm.
a certain city. So I don't know. Just some food for thought, though. None of this is mandatory. It's just if this is the goal, if early retirement's the goal, here's
Yep.
some things to consider to get you there sooner. And it's going to involve some trade-offs and sacrifices. So
Yep.
spend less on
Corey was
housing.
talking Corey was talking a little bit earlier about like the accounts you put money into and things like that. And the brokerage account is one, or like a non-retirement account is one you can access before age 59 and a half, which is really useful. But you also want to make sure, like this is one other thing you can control is just focus on those tax advantaged accounts too, especially if you're in a higher income tax bracket and you can potentially like reduce your taxable income and max out all your retirement plans, do like a backdoor Roth, like all of those kinds of things because taxes will be an important part of the picture too when we're thinking about being able to save adequately, when we're thinking about having enough income in retirement and when that what that looks like after taxes. So, it'll be like maxing out pre-tax accounts, maxing out Roth accounts if and when we can access them. Maybe putting money into a health savings account and investing it, which we've talked a little bit about those before, but they're kind of complicated, but you can potentially have some big tax advantages to saving and investing in those accounts as well. And then you'll again likely need to put a substantial amount into a non-retirement slash brokerage account, like an investment account that's easily accessible before age 59 and a half. And it may, if you're retiring at age 55, it's got to be at least 5 years of your retirement savings in there, hopefully a lot more, so that you still have like some money in that bucket available for retirement beyond age 60. But it's important to, when you're thinking about saving a lot, like spreading it across all these different buckets and getting whatever tax breaks you can get.
Yeah, and I know a lot of folks, maybe not a lot, but some folks, they try to build out a real estate portfolio. It's like, oh, I'm going to generate this passive income so that I can stop
Yeah.
working and get that income stream. Not liquid and not guaranteed. So, like, if you're planning to retire in your 50s, like Rochelle said, having a bucket that's liquid and accessible without penalty. Like, if the money's tied up in a house, you might have to sell the house, assuming you can sell it. You might not be able to.
Hmm.
Um, to get that cash out. So, I'm all for having those passive income streams. But in addition to that, it's probably smart to have a bucket of money that's more flexible, liquid, and accessible so that you're not dependent on tenants and
Yeah.
potential sales. Like there could be a year where you have a lot of expenses associated with a property and all that rental income is eaten up with maintenance costs. And then,
Hmm.
if you're not able to touch your 401k money or IRA money, that could be problematic potentially. So maybe we
Yep.
have to take out a mortgage on one of the properties to fund our living expenses. So,
Yep. Yeah. I think just to kind of add on to that, I think it's important to be consistent with like your investment strategies, but also kind of keep things simple. For some people, like they want to do more sophisticated things that's really attractive to them. And like they have some specific reasons that they want to engage in those sorts of things, like real estate. But if you want to just make it easy for yourself, You don't have to overcomplicate things. You can do things very simply and just be consistent with your investments and make sure you're like investing on a regular basis every month or whatever time frame it is that you have for yourself, and just use well-diversified mutual funds and index funds and ETFs. And when you're not overcomplicating things, it makes it so that it's harder to second guess yourself. And I think when you're second guessing yourself, that's when you can sometimes work against yourself in ways when you're working towards retirement. So, maybe you're doing something more complicated. It's not going exactly as you expected. And now you want to exit that strategy. And now we've lost money. Or maybe we have some concentrated risk in real estate, like Corey was talking about. And now we want to get out of that. And now we've lost money. So, if you we generally encourage people to keep things simple. It's just going to be a little bit easier, and also you're going to be able to do it more consistently.
Yeah, speaking of keeping things simple, maybe don't have kids because kids complicate things.
We're not going to tell you to not have kids, but that
Yeah.
was the next thing we're going to talk about. If you do have kids, we literally recorded an episode called Kids Are Expensive because they are.
Yeah.
Like, having a child dramatically changes your financial picture. It just does. Like, the biggest things will be childcare, unless you live in the magical state of New Mexico, where apparently childcare is free at this point. But also like college savings. Maybe you need a bigger house. Maybe you need a bigger car. They're going to ask for stuff all the time. Vacations will be more expensive, like all of that. And it will be from the moment they're born until they have left the house, which may or may not be when you hope that it will be, right? So,
And even after they've left the house, they might still be costing you
yeah.
money.
I
Like,
mean, some of you still cost your parents money. You know who you are. You're listening. But
and some of you that are listening might still be supporting your adult children and
yeah,
like paying for college and grad
for sure.
school and helping them with housing, and they're on your cell
Yeah.
phone bill and your car insurance, and they just can't seem to get a job, and you're helping them in between. So like, again, I think the last episode we did was on raising kids to, ultimately be in a position where they're financially independent and no longer reliant on the bank of mom and dad. Obviously, the sooner the better. Um, but yeah, those children, we love them. But
But they cost us money.
they're gonna uh, impede your ability to save additionally for retirement purposes. So
Hmm.
it's rare that we come across people with children who are in a position to retire, quote unquote, early. It happens. Like, I can think of a
Hmm.
few clients off the top of my head that are in a position probably by their early to mid 50s where if they wanted to scale back considerably or even potentially quit, it's doable and they have
Hmm.
kids. But for most of you, it's going to be working until at least the kids are through college, would be the guess. And depending on what age you had children, maybe that's mid 50s, maybe that's mid 60s, who knows? So,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
I think one kind of silver lining with the whole kid thing is that it does limit your ability to spend money on yourself. So you have this big portion of your day-to-day budget from like 0 to 18, or maybe through college if you're helping them pay tuition costs and college expenses while they're in college, that like is being sucked out of your cash flow and really it's gone towards them. So once you've removed that from your life, hopefully when they are older and financially like kind of managing things on their own, then your income need is less. So the income need that you have in retirement may be a little bit less because you didn't get used to like doing the fancy vacations because you had to bring the kids along, and so you couldn't afford the fancy vacations or whatever it is. Obviously this picture and this dynamic changes dramatically depending on, if you're earning $200,000 versus earning $1 million, like it may or may not have as big of an effect on you. But it can prevent some of that lifestyle creep for you personally because some of that money is going towards their care and their expenses.
yeah, and then you remove that expense from the equation and you got a lot of extra
Mm-hmm.
flexibility in the budget at that point.
Woo woo.
Um, let's see, reframing what early retirement means to you. So reassess the goals. If we have kids, we want to delay financial independence so that we can get our kids on the road to adulthood. Are we in a position to scale back and still get our kids on the road to adulthood? I think one thing to consider when we are like, what does retirement look like? Let's really paint that picture. And it's going to be different for everyone. Like just the idea, we want to retire to something, not from our job. I think a lot of people, especially doctors who are burning out and are like, oh man, this job isn't what it was cracked up to be. I'd like to just see patients, but all this admin work and being told what to do and the hospital administrator is stacking more stuff on our plate and yada yada yada. Having to call insurance companies to get stuff pre-authorized is half my day and it's not enjoyable. Um, so it's, yes, we'd like to retire from that, but what are we going to? What are we going to do in retirement? Like if you don't have any hobbies or friends and you're done working at 55, you're going to get pretty bored puttering around the house. Um, so like let's foster those relationships, get that network, our social network, um, so that we have people to do things with. And maybe at 55, like you won't have friends that you can hang out with on a Tuesday because they're all working. Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
so you might be hanging out with the 75-year-olds at the golf course who, so you might be
At the
making new
local rec
friends.
center.
Yeah,
Oh
or
my
doing
gosh,
yoga
my
at the
local
rec
rec
center.
center is amazing.
Yeah, like I do. I don't always get there weekly, at maybe 2 to 3 times a month, but there's this Monday yoga class that I do at 9 a.m. and it's me and a bunch of women in their 50s and 60s, basically.
Corey, I have that same yoga
Yeah,
class, but it's Friday at 9:30 and it is quite the mix of men and women, shall I say.
there's a
But they're
couple
like,
dudes,
yeah, I
but
think the average age is
yeah,
70
there
and the
might,
instructor is probably 80.
yeah.
Like he's
So it's, uh, um, but yeah, have hobbies like do yoga,
hmm
do hiking,
hmm
fly fishing, golfing, tennis, pickleball, you name it, like whatever you're into, bike riding, cooking. Maybe, maybe you decide, hey, I'm going to learn to play an instrument. I'm going to do what is it? The Mahjong. Isn't that popular card game that everyone's playing now?
It's like a tiles,
Or
right?
tiles. I have no
It used
idea.
to be tiles. Maybe it's a card game now. I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
It seems like everywhere it's popping up. I don't know what it
Oh,
is, but I
interesting.
see like mahjong clubs.
I think it's like a Chinese game. Like it was,
That
yeah.
makes sense.
Hmm.
And so yeah, like having those activities, hobbies to keep you busy. Maybe it's volunteer work, maybe you do locums, whatever it is. But like, what's the
Hmm.
plan? What are we retiring to? For some people, like you've got too many hobbies, and it's like you'll have more than enough to
Hmm.
fill your day. Between getting up, exercising that we can't have time to do now, and we'd love to be able to like spend an hour exercising and then showering and then going to the grocery store and making dinner and oh look, it's dinner time already. Like you could fill your day pretty quickly. But for others, it's you might find retirement isn't all that it's cracked up to be if you really identified and your whole life was your work. So, what are we retiring to? What's it going to be like? Figuring out what that cost might look like. Like if we're wanting to travel every month, every day is a Saturday in retirement. It might be more expensive than when we were working. So factoring that into the equation. Now, for most people, the typical arc in retirement, spending arc, like the first couple of years of retirement, you end up spending more than when you were working because you have more free time. Again, every day is a weekend. You travel more, you go out more. We're going to more restaurants. We're having fun. And then after we get that out of our system, after a couple of years, things kind of start to
Settle.
gradually decrease and continue to decrease until you die. Maybe the last few years, like costs spike just due to healthcare and assisted living needs. Um, but for most people, peaks in early retirement and then it's a gradual decline in spending because you're just not going to be traveling as much in your 80s and 90s as you are in your 50s and 60s. You're not going to be going as far. You're not going to be going out to eat as much, maybe not. Some of the activities you do, like there may be they're not going to be as luxurious as costly. Um, so it's but figuring that out, Rachelle and I, that's our job. So we help our clients
Hmm.
do that stuff. But
Hmm.
um, but kind of get an idea. All right, what's retirement going to look like from a cost standpoint? And then we can reverse solve how much do we need to sustain that through the golden years.
Yep. I think the other thing is like take a second to just reflect on when do people usually retire? And if we're not fortunate enough to make a good income and things like that, lots of times it's late 60s, early 70s. Like that's when a lot of people can afford to retire. So maybe early is 60. Maybe that's early enough. Or maybe, it's not really about, like Corey said, it's not really about like, okay, I want to quit tomorrow. Maybe it's like, I just hate my job and I want it to be different. And it can be a very like gradual path to retirement where maybe at 55 we go half time because we can stomach half time. We'd actually prefer to be working some rather than none because we don't want to get bored and we don't have enough hobbies or whatever it is. And that way you can leave your investments to grow for a while and not touch it. And then by the time you're ready to fully retire at 60, your money had 5 more years to grow. Maybe you weren't able to save a ton when you were doing like 50% work, but now we have substantially more to sustain us until we don't need it anymore. So there's lots of different ways to kind of adjust as needed to make what we're doing practical and not run out of money when we're 70 and still need to live for a while, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yep. Either way, I think saving is key. If you want to retire early, you're going to have to save a bunch. Bottom line, if you can make it so you're not spending a whole lot, that's going to help you save. It's also going to make it so your lifestyle is more sustainable in retirement and kids are expensive. That's
I
the
guess
other
one
thing.
thing we don't really need to spend time on it, but
Yeah.
we talked about reducing some of the big ticket expenses. A
Hmm.
potentially easier route is just make more money. Like find
Yeah.
ways to earn more income, whether that's through side gigs, consulting, negotiating, job changes, whatever, and just saving that difference. So find ways to bring in more money, probably easier than just, hey, I'm going to downsize my house to save $1,000 a
Yeah.
month. Like,
Yeah.
um, so that can help increase the savings rate possibly more feasibly than cutting expenses out of the equation. But yeah,
Yeah.
regardless, saving a large percentage of your income is the key to being able to retire early. Simple math.
Yep. Make it happen. Good luck.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.